Chosen one. There are achievements that impact families. There are milestones that impact communities. And then there are such rare, such courageous, such divinely ordained actions that an entire nation feels their impact. You stepped into something that no one around you had the courage, the clarity, or the call to do. While others were calculating the risks, you were walking on with your faith. While others were negotiating comfort, you were surrendering to your purpose. And when you moved, something unseen moved with you. People were amazed not only by what you accomplished, but by who you became in the process. They saw the result. God saw the obedience. They saw the headlines. God saw the hidden nights, the oppression, the loneliness, the faith that refused to die. Watch this video until the very end, because every part of it is connected to what is unfolding in your life right now. End praying, and write your warmest wishes in the comments, and write Amen along with the number 99. There is power in agreement. There is energy in declaration. And when a chosen form speaks from belief instead of fear, something shifts. Now, as you continue watching, understand that what happened through you was not random. It was not luck. It was alignment. Now, chosen one, like this video. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and let's begin. You did something no one else in your country has done. Let that settle. Not in pride, not in arrogance, but in awe. Because this is not about ego, it is about evidence. Evidence that God placed a blueprint inside you that did not exist in anyone else around you. Evidence that you were never meant to follow the same timeline, the same pattern, or the same expectations that governed the people around you. From the beginning, there was a difference, not always visible, not always celebrated. Sometimes it even made you feel isolated, but difference is often the first sign of divine assignment. There were moments when you questioned why your path looked unfamiliar, why doors that opened easily for others seemed irrelevant to you, why conversations that satisfied others felt empty in your spirit. You sensed something bigger, but you could not fully describe it. And that is because what you were carrying had never been seen before in your environment. You were not just called to participate in your country's story. You were called to rewrite a paragraph of it. People were stunned. Some applauded. Some doubted. Some went silent. Silence is interesting. It is often louder than criticism. When people cannot categorize you, they freeze. When they cannot predict you, they hesitate. When they realize you have crossed a line they were too afraid to approach. Your achievement did not just shock them because it was impressive. It shocked them because it disrupted their sense of what was possible. In your country, there are unwritten ceilings, invisible boundaries, cultural expectations that quietly define how far someone like you is supposed to go. You crossed one, and when you crossed it, you did not just change your position. You changed perception. You showed that limitation was not law. You proved that destiny is not restricted by geography, and somewhere in the unseen realm, God smiled at the courage that carried you through. Understand this clearly. Groundbreaking moments rarely feel glamorous while they are happening. They feel uncertain, heavy, lonely. You were not walking on a red carpet. You were walking through resistance. There were whispers. There were raised eyebrows. There were moments when even you wondered if you had misunderstood the assignment. But something deeper kept you steady. A knowing, a quiet assurance that even if no one else understood, you were not alone in the decision. God does not create replicas. He creates originals, and originals often disturb systems built on repetition. Your move disrupted repetition. It interrupted the cycle of this, is how it has always been done. That is why people were stunned. You did not just succeed. You shifted a narrative. There is a certain kind of courage that comes when a person realizes they have nothing left to prove and everything to fulfill. You stepped into that courage. It was not loud, it was not reckless, it was deliberate. It came from a place of inner transformation that had been building for years. While others saw the public moment, they did not see the private preparation. They did not see the nights you wrestled with doubt. They did not see the sacrifices that shaped your resilience. They did not see how many times you almost gave up, but chose to believe one more time. When history marks moments of firsts, it often reduces them to statistics. First to achieve this, first to break that barrier. But heaven does not record statistics the same way humans do. Heaven records surrender. Heaven records faith under pressure. Heaven records the decision to move when staying comfortable would have been easier. And that is what makes your story powerful. It is not just about being first. It is about being faithful. In your country, many people were conditioned to wait, to observe, to follow established footsteps. But you moved as if the footsteps were meant to be created by you. That difference is what separated you. And it did not happen overnight. It was cultivated in silence. It was strengthened through rejection. It was refined in seasons when you felt misunderstood. People were stunned because your breakthrough exposed their hesitation. Not in a cruel way, not in a mocking way, but in a revealing way. When one person dares to cross a boundary, it reveals that the boundary was never absolute, and that revelation can be uncomfortable for those who chose to stay behind it. You carried a vision that did not fit the local narrative. It did not match the typical expectations. It stretched beyond familiar standards. And when you acted on it, it created shock waves, not just because of the success itself, but because of what it represented. It represented possibility. It represented expansion. It represented a new chapter that no one had dared to open before. There is something deeply spiritual about being first. It requires a kind of trust that goes beyond logic. It requires alignment with God that sustains you when applause is absent. It requires inner clarity that keeps you grounded when external validation is delayed. And you walked through all of that, not perfectly, not without fear, but persistently. Some people are remembered for fitting in. Others are remembered for standing out. And then there are those rare souls who are remembered for transforming the environment entirely. You stepped into transformation. You did not wait for permission. You did not wait for unanimous approval. You moved when the timing felt divinely aligned, even if the crowd was confused. What you did was not just impressive. It was prophetic. It announced something about your identity that had been hidden beneath ordinary labels. It revealed that you were never meant to blend into the background. You were meant to redefine what the foreground looks like. There will always be those who try to reduce your accomplishment to coincidence. They will say it was timing. They will say it was connections. They will say it was luck. But deep down, even they know there was something different about the way this unfolded. There was a grace attached to it, a protection around it, a sequence of events that lined up too precisely to be accidental. God orchestrates moments that humans cannot fully decode, and sometimes the evidence of that orchestration is so undeniable that even skeptics fall silent. That silence is not defeat. It is recognition. As you reflect on what you accomplished, understand that this is not the end of the story. Being first is not about reaching a final destination. It is about opening a door that others did not know could be opened. It is about creating a pathway where there was once only doubt. It is about showing that divine calling does not bow to cultural limitation. You did something no one else in your country has done. And while the world focuses on the visible achievement, heaven celebrates the invisible growth that made it possible, the resilience, the obedience, the unwavering belief that your life was designed for more than average outcomes. People were stunned, but you were aligned. And alignment with God always produces moments that statistics alone cannot explain. What happened after that moment was even more powerful than the moment itself. Because when you become the first to do something in a nation, you do not just achieve, you awaken conversations. You awaken hidden dreams and strangers who never thought someone from their background could rise like that. You awaken resistance in those who were comfortable with things staying the same. And you awaken a deeper awareness inside yourself that says, this was only the beginning. The atmosphere shifted around your name. Suddenly the same people who once overlooked you were trying to understand you. The same spaces that once ignored your presence were now adjusting to your impact. And it felt surreal at times, because you remembered who you were before this happened. You remembered the days when your vision seemed too big for your surroundings. You remembered the moments when even speaking about your goals felt like you were breaking an unspoken rule. But now the evidence was visible. Now the impossible had a face, and that face was yours. Being the first carries a weight that few people talk about. It is not just applause. It is responsibility. When you cross a line that no one else has crossed, you feel the eyes of many watching to see what you will do next. Some watch with admiration. Some watch with curiosity. Some watch with quiet hope that you might fail, so their comfort can remain intact. But you kept moving, not because you needed to prove anything, but because stopping would have felt like betraying the calling that brought you this far. There is something sacred about the moment when a nation realizes that one of its own has broken through a ceiling it thought was permanent. It forces a collective re-evaluation. It forces people to ask deeper questions. If this was possible for you, what else is possible? If you could rise beyond the limits they accepted, what other limits are illusions? Your achievement became more than personal success. It became a mirror held up to the mindset of an entire environment. And what makes this even more powerful is that you did not come from a place of ease. You did not rise with a golden path laid out in front of you. There were obstacles that would have discouraged most people. There were systems not designed for someone like you to excel. There were moments when resources seemed scarce and support seemed distant. Yet somehow, step by step, door by door, breakthrough by breakthrough, you advanced. Not loudly, not recklessly, but steadily. God does not waste preparation seasons. Every delay you experienced was building endurance. Every rejection was refining clarity. Every misunderstanding was strengthening your independence. So when the moment came to do what no one else had done, you were not stepping into it unprepared. You were stepping into it matured. Some people assume that stunning the crowd means you always felt fearless. That is not true. There were moments when your heart beat faster than usual. Moments when stepping forward felt like walking into the unknown without a map. But courage is not the absence of uncertainty. Courage is movement despite it. And you moved. The day people were stunned, it was not because you suddenly transformed into someone new. It was because the version of you that had been developing in private finally became visible in public. The discipline, the vision, the refusal to settle, the quiet conversations you had with God when no one else understood your journey. And all of it converged into a single outcome that could not be ignored. And here is something even deeper. When you become the first, You are often misunderstood before you were celebrated. There were whispers before there were congratulations. There were questions before there was respect. Some people tried to analyze you, some tried to minimize what you did, but time has a way of revealing truth. And as days passed, it became clear that what happened was not a fluke. It was fulfillment. You felt it inside. A shift, a realization that the boundaries around your life were never as solid as they seemed. You began to see yourself differently, not in arrogance, but in awareness, gone, awareness that you were capable of more than you once imagined. Awareness that your obedience to your calling had consequences bigger than you predicted. In your country, traditions run deep. Expectations are often inherited, and stepping outside of them can feel like stepping outside of safety. Yet you did it. You chose purpose over predictability. You chose destiny over approval. And when the outcome stunned people, it was not because you chased attention. It was because you followed alignment. There were moments after the breakthrough when you sat quietly processing everything, the messages, the reactions, the energy, and in those quiet moments you understood something profound. This was not just about being first. It was about being faithful to what God placed inside you, even when it looked unrealistic to others. The impact of your move extended beyond headlines and conversations. It reached into homes where someone felt stuck. It reached into hearts that were shrinking their dreams to fit their environment. Without even trying to, you became proof that different is not wrong. Different can be divine, and with that proof comes a new level of awareness. You cannot return to thinking small after breaking a national barrier. You cannot pretend you are ordinary after witnessing what happens when you align with purpose. Something expands inside you permanently, a confidence not rooted in ego but in experience. People were stunned because they saw the result. But you know the deeper truth. You know how many times you had to choose belief over fear. You know how many silent battles you fought before the visible victory appeared. You know that this was not an overnight phenomenon. It was a layered transformation. There will always be more to accomplish, more ceilings to break, more spaces to Greek more, spaces to redefine. But this particular moment will remain sacred. It marked a line in your story. Before this, you were becoming. After this, you were undeniable. And as the days continue to unfold, the echo of that stunned reaction will fade for others, but not for you, because it will remind you of what is possible. When obedience meets opportunity, when preparation meets timing, when vision meets divine orchestration, you did something no one else in your country has done. And that truth is not fading. It is expanding. After the initial shock settled and the noise began to quiet down, something even more significant started to unfold. The external reaction was powerful, but the internal shift was deeper. When you become the first to do something unprecedented in your country, you don't just change history, you change identity. Not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. There was a moment, perhaps late at night or early in the morning, when everything was silent and you finally had space to breathe. No headlines, no conversations, no messages, just you and the weight of what had happened. And in that stillness, the realization felt almost surreal. You crossed a line that had stood untouched for generations. You stepped into territory that had intimidated others into retreat. And now there was no going back to who you used to be. Being first is not a trophy, it is a transformation. Something inside you expanded permanently. The limitations that once felt real now felt negotiable. The ceilings that once looked solid now looked fragile. You understood in a new way that many of the barriers people accept are not immovable walls. They are inherited beliefs. And by moving forward when others hesitated, you exposed that truth. But what makes your story remarkable is not just that you succeeded, it's that you remained grounded through it. There is a temptation that comes with being exceptional. The temptation to let applause redefine your worth. The temptation to build identity on recognition. But you did not rise for attention. You rose because something in you refused to ignore the call of God placed on your life, and that difference is everything. When God positions someone as the first, it is rarely about personal glory. It is about divine disruption. It is about shifting a narrative that has been stagnant for too long. It is about introducing a new standard that forces systems to evolve. Your breakthrough was not random, it was strategic. It was timed. It was aligned with something bigger than personal ambition. There were people who tried to understand how you did it. They studied your steps, they analyzed your background, they searched for a formula. But they missed something crucial. This was not just strategy. This was alignment. This was a journey shaped by obedience when no one was watching. Before the world saw the victory, there were countless invisible decisions. Decisions to keep going when progress was slow. Decisions to stay disciplined when shortcuts were available. Decisions to trust the process even when you could not see the full picture. Those quiet decisions built the foundation for the moment that stunned everyone. And let's be honest, there were times when you almost convinced yourself to shrink the vision. Times when playing it safe felt easier. Times when blending in seemed less exhausting than standing out. But every time doubt whispered, something stronger responded. A steady reminder that your life was not meant to follow an average script. The environment you grew up in may not have produced examples of what you became. That is precisely why it is powerful. You became the example, you became the reference point. Now when someone says, "Has anyone from here ever done this?" your name enters the conversation. That shift changes more than perception. That shift changes more than perception. It changes possibility. There is something sacred about possibility expanding because of one person's courage. Some people were inspired immediately. Others resisted quietly. Some celebrated you openly. Others processed your breakthrough in silence. But whether they expressed it or not, everyone felt it. Because when someone redefines what is achievable, it forces a collective reckoning. Your story unsettled comfort zones, and yet you did not move with aggression or arrogance. You moved with focus. You did not need to announce your greatness. The result spoke. The impact spoke. The history spoke, even. Now, there may be moments when the magnitude of it all catches you off guard. Moments when you replay the journey in your mind and think, did that really happen? But it did, and it happened through you. This is what makes it extraordinary. You did not wait for perfect conditions. You did not wait for unanimous support. You moved when the timing aligned internally, even if externally it looked uncertain. That is a rare kind of strength. Many people wait for reassurance from the crowd. You moved with reassurance from conviction. And that conviction was not self-generated alone. It was cultivated in relationship with God. In moments when you felt unseen, there was still guidance. In moments when you felt unsure, there was still direction. You may not have always understood how things would unfold, but you trusted that you were being led somewhere intentional. When people were stunned, they were reacting to the outcome. But heaven was responding to the journey. There is a difference. Outcomes impress people, journeys impress God, and your journey was layered with perseverance. There were setbacks that could have defined you, but you refused to let them. There were critics who underestimated you, but their doubt did not become your identity. There were obstacles that seemed immovable, but step by step they lost their power. Now that you have crossed this unprecedented line, you carry something new. Not pressure, but perspective. You know what it feels like to break a barrier. You know what it feels like to move when others freeze. You know what it feels like to trust beyond visible evidence. That knowledge cannot be taken from you. The nation may remember the Ed headline, but you will remember the nights, the preparation, the internal battles, the prayers whispered when no one else knew what you were facing. Those are the details that give the victory weight, and this is only part of the story. Being the first does not isolate you. It initiates a ripple. Others will follow where you stepped. Others will attempt what once seemed unreachable. And even if they never say it out loud, your breakthrough will be part of their courage. That is legacy. Legacy is not built by copying what has always been done. It is built by daring to do what has never been done before. You did something no one else in your country has done. Not by accident, not by coincidence, but by alignment, resilience, and unwavering commitment to what God placed inside you. And as this chapter continues to unfold, one truth remains unshaken. You were never meant to be common. As time continued to move forward, the meaning of what you had done began to deepen. At first, it was shock. Headlines, conversations, reactions, reactions. But after the noise softened, something more enduring remained. Respect, recognition, and an unspoken understanding that a line had been crossed permanently. When you become the first to do something in your country, you don't just change statistics, you change standards. What once seemed unreachable now has a reference point. What once felt like fantasy now has proof. Your life became evidence that limits are often inherited beliefs, disguised as reality. And whether people admitted it or not, your breakthrough forced them to reconsider what they thought was impossible. There were individuals who watched you quietly before you succeeded. They observed your determination. They noticed your discipline, but they didn't fully believe in the outcome. And then, when it happened, their disbelief turned into astonishment. They were not just stunned by the mad achievement. They were stunned by your persistence. Because persistence is what separates dreams from history. You didn't wake up one day and suddenly make national history. You built toward it through effort that was invisible to most, through choices that were inconvenient, through moments when quitting would have been easier than continuing. Every step was laying a brick in a foundation that no one else could see yet. And here is something profound. When you are called to be first, you often walk alone before you walk, recognized. There were seasons when your vision felt isolating. Conversations where people politely nodded, but internally doubted, environs where your ambition seemed excessive. But you carried on, not because you were trying to compete with anyone, but because something within you refused to shrink. God does not assign groundbreaking missions to those who need constant validation. He shapes those who can withstand silence before applause, and you endured that silence. The day people were stunned was not random. It was the culmination of endurance. It was the visible fruit of invisible faithfulness. Some people wondered how you handled the pressure, how you managed expectations, how you navigated uncertainty without collapsing. What they did not realize is that the pressure had been training you long before the spotlight arrived. The weight that once felt overwhelming became strength. The obstacles that once felt intimidating became stepping stones. You were not just building success, you were building capacity. Capacity to carry influence, capacity to sandal visibility, capacity to remain grounded while standing out. And that capacity is what makes this story powerful. Because many people can achieve a moment, very few can sustain what comes after it. After the shock faded, you continued to move with focus. You did not freeze in celebration. You did not let the applause distract you from purpose. Instead, you carried yourself with a calm confidence that unsettled even more people than the achievement itself. Because they expected excitement, they expected ego. They expected dramatic reaction. Instead, they saw steadiness. That steadiness revealed something deeper. It revealed that this was not luck. It was alignment. When God orchestrates elevation, it comes with internal stability. You were not thrown into chaos by success. You were anchored, and that anchor came from the journey you walked long before recognition found you. There were people who once doubted you who now reference you. There were spaces that once read you that now make room for you. And while all of that may seem external, it carries internal confirmation. Not that you are superior, but that you were obedient to your assignment. Your breakthrough did something subtle but powerful. It disrupted comparison. In environments where everyone measures themselves against one another, your move shifted the scale entirely. You were not competing within the system. You transcended it, and when someone transcends the system, comparison loses its grip. People were stunned because they realized you were operating from a different level of conviction, and conviction is contagious. There are individuals right now who are daring to dream bigger because of what you did. They may never meet you, they may never tell you, but your story is circulating in conversations you are not even present for. Your name is being mentioned as proof that it can be done. That is impact beyond visibility. And yet through it all you remain aware of the truth. You know the late nights. You know the fear that tried to speak louder than faith. You know the fear that tried to speak louder than faith. You know the moments when you had to remind yourself why you started. That humility keeps you balanced. Being first does not mean being finished. It means you opened something. There are still greater dimensions of your calling unfolding. What stunned the nation was a milestone, not a conclusion, because once you break one ceiling, you realize there are higher skies available. And the same resilience that carried you here will carry you further. The most powerful part of your story is not just that you succeeded. It's that you did not compromise who you were to do it. You did not abandon your values. You did not distort your identity. You remained aligned with the core of who God shaped you to be. That integrity, what sustains elevation. People often assume that national level impact changes a person completely, and in some ways it does. It expands perspective. It increases awareness. It deepens responsibility. But at your core, you are still the same person who once believed quietly before the world believed publicly. That consistency is rare, and that rarity is what made your achievement unforgettable. There are still individuals trying to process how you managed to do what had never been done before. They search for shortcuts. They search for secrets. But the truth is simple. Even if it wasn't easy, you refused to let inherited limitation define your future. And that refusal altered history. When people were stunned, they were reacting to what they saw. But what they could not see was the spiritual architecture beneath it. The timing, the discipline, the alignment, the quiet partnership with God that shaped each step. You did something no one else in your country has done. And now the narrative has changed, not because of noise, but because of you. As the months unfolded, the impact of what you had done did not fade. It matured. At first, it was reaction. Then it became recognition. But now, it is something even more powerful. It is reference. Your achievement is no longer just an event people talk about. It is a point of comparison, a benchmark, a moment in time that divided before and after. There was a version of your country before you crossed that line, and there is a version after. That is what it means to do something no one else has done. The deeper truth is this: your breakthrough did not just elevate you, it expanded imagination. It forced conversations in rooms you have never entered. It shifted perspectives in minds you have never met. Somewhere a young person heard your story and silently thought, if they did it, maybe I can too. And that thought alone is revolutionary because possibility is contagious. What makes your story so powerful is not only the scale of the achievement, but the context. You did not come from a system that was designed for you to succeed at this level. You were not handed a roadmap. You were not surrounded by countless examples proving it could be done. In many ways, you were stepping into unknown territory with nothing but conviction and faith guiding you, and yet you walked forward anyway. There is a kind of courage that emerges when you realize you are no longer trying to fit inside a structure. You are building one. That is what you did. You did not wait for your environment to expand. You expanded within it until it had no choice but to adjust.